Disclaimer. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. I was 2 years old. Allowance is made for quote-unquote fair use for purposes such as criticism, like, hate that shit. Comment, like that shit. News reporting, this is the shit that happened. Teaching, this is shit that can happen. Scholarship, you should know this shit happens. Education and research, I learned that shit happened and then I read about it again. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. AKA, you think it's yours, it probably is, but it's been turned into art because it's been changed, altered, reused, commented on, or made art by someone who likes what you did. Thank you, Fluzzy B, for being here. Let's get it going. In the middle of the night, when you least expect it, is there a knock at the door? And when you go to it, is there no one there? What could that be? When you look down at your feet, was there a penny in a bone? Would you know what that meant? Yes, Fluzzy B, I have yet to incarnate the magic to pull the exclamation-like move. I will have to consult with Nightbot about that. Do your neighbors hide in the shadows as you pass by, seeking to avert your gaze? Are they odd? Do you know them? Do they keep bottles on their trees? Are you sure you're the only one who's been in the house? Well, I can tell you that you may not know, but don't be paranoid. Unless, of course, you may have upset these neighbors or their friends. Do you know who peers at you from the shadows? Do you know what they know? Are you as read as they on the grimoire and the sacred texts? Are you aware of the seals of Solomon? Do you know of the healing herbs? Have you been in the forest dancing naked by the moonlight and the fire? Have you worn the crown of antlers while dancing by said fire? You may be the neighbors. Be aware. some people have abilities and interests that you don't know about. And I would caution you that you should tread carefully some days. Because these people might actually have left something for you in the backyard buried. Just a small token of reference, how they feel. Or in fact, they might leave something that protects you at the boundary of your doorstep. Would you know? Would you see the signs? Today we're also going to cover the hunt for those people. The idea that these people are our fears, the unknown, those who might undo us. But in actuality, they are just misunderstood. They are outcast. They are unlike us. They are just slightly different. These people were hunted down nearly 400 years ago, starting in the early 1600s, when King James penned the book of demonology. Yes, that King James, because before he had the official version that we now know of as the King James Bible written, he was interested in something known as demonology. The hunt for witches, the understanding of cryptids, and a deeper understanding of the world of the occult. This set off a fire that lasted for nearly 350 years, killing and leaving a toll in its wake that we feel to this day in a state of paranoia against what we don't know. Because even here in the United States, those that may have been called Protestant or Pilgrim set upon their own neighbors, and between the dates of February 1692 and May 1693, my friends, more than 200 normal people were accused, pointed at, held in chains, tortured, called and forced to testify to things that were a lie. 30 of those people were found guilty, 19 of whom were executed by garroted hanging, meaning their neck didn't break. 14 of them were women, 5 were men, and yes, even 2 were dogs. And I think knowing that, and the fact that those kind of people are still out there amongst us, suggests something that you and I both know, what time it is. It's time, my friends, to look up. Good evening, growling arachnid. Lita Caprati! What's happening? Good evening. I'm so glad you could join me. Tonight, we are looking at one of the most commonly scary events in American society. in the world that's happened time and time again. We're gonna observe, my friends, and learn a little bit more about the witch hunts. We're gonna talk a little bit about witchery. We're gonna talk about my own experiences. I'm gonna share a couple stories. And I'm also going to go into the tale of Andrea Yates. Now, what do these things have to do with one another? All of them are, my friends, a search for evil where there is none. A common person turned on their head by circumstance, in Andrea's case, science, because of her meds, and in the case of the witch hunts, belief and faith and trust in those who would have you believe others are your enemy so that they can maintain a format of control. Zyrax, good evening. So glad you could join. Mystery Sky, good to see you. Nice of you all to be here. It's you've dealt with witches. Very good evening. I have dealt with witches. I've dealt with a lot of things. My background is diverse. I think we've all had that one too, Growling Arachnid. Facts. We've all seen that one that we could call out and say, well, she's cursing me somehow. Or they're cursing me. Drinking a pumpkin spice latte right now. There's a time period in our history, in human history, that repeats over and over. And before I get into the show, I'd like to talk briefly about it. Because it happened not long ago, in a time before most of us sitting here online were born. It's called the McCarthy era, where those who didn't fall into line in a certain, well, let's just say, political demographic, were looked at as though they were a witch. Not just any witch, but the witch that would turn against the entire nation and somehow taint the water. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people were expelled and outed when they did nothing but maybe read a book or ask a question. This is a trait amongst human tribalism. This is a commonality amongst the mob when they are limited to fear. I urge you, beyond liking and subscribing, to not give in to the fear. Your neighbors are not spies. Your neighbors, the people in chat, are not witches. There's no one to burn out of their home. It's literally just a power play of a few who'd wish for you to not look in their direction. That is always the case in Wag the Dog, which is what a witch hunt is. A format of Wag the Dog. Magic comes in the utilization of your psychology against you. It's not just abracadabra, but rather hubu de buku, de hubu de bugu. You will be in fear. Why does this affect us so? Provo Planet, what's happening? Come on in, good to see you. Been a minute. My friends, don't burn your neighbors out of their houses, for they may turn and burn you later. There's a story to share about that as well. But first, hello and welcome. I'm AronMSound, and this is the show known as Lookup the Remix, where I tend to interject myself into a conversation that nobody asked me to be a part of, and by way of, I extend it into a place that nobody wants it to go. Tonight, I once again bring you the spooky, the scary, the unknown, and the macabre. Starting with the tales of witch hunts and witchery and my own experiences, and then moving in towards the story of Andrea Yates, the sad tale of a woman who's still with us in an asylum care. She drowned her 5 children because she believed that they were heading to hell. And I relate this in a way that I did the other night. To the boogeyman, to the witch, to the unknown werewolf in our midst, whom we trust with our love, but whom we miss the signs or ignore the signs as they commit atrocity in the name of belief. Now, I would call this witchery because it's imaginary on that level. And I'm not saying that witchcraft is imaginary. No, I've seen and felt its effects. Belief is a powerful tool, and we now know that, well, electrons form when observed. There is a state of matter which has always been manipulated. The question is whether or not you knew how to call out to manipulate it. And that being said, do you? Aleg bako anya, alaraya masangueño, aleg bako anya. Do you know the sacred words to call upon the spirits? Are you calling angels? Do you know the demons' names? Is it Baal or Ba'athba? Is it Azazel or Ariel? Are you a follower of Michael and his fiery sword? These things we support now because we know that there's more to the world and belief and society than there was before. And even if you don't believe in mysticism, esotericism, mythology, cryptology, and the practice of the occult, alchemy, or metaphysical practices based in grimoire research, it doesn't really matter, because what matters is that you know 2 + 2, I would gather, and that is considered magic in some minds of some certain times. Yeah, I left it at just the beginning, Cyrax. I'm sure you're probably one of the few that knows what I just sang. I should sing Palu just for good measure, right? Our world is filled with beliefs and incantation of all different nature, whether it be a prayer in church or someone looking over mathematics in a theoretical fashion, writing them as if it was language. Isn't that incantation as well? Bringing into being what is otherwise fermented in our minds and our spirits, something we see before we actually bring it to being, manifesting, so to speak, in modern language. Well, there have been times where the creative spirit has been crushed, where the healing idea and the knowledge of herbal medicine, motion of the planets, shape of the galaxy, and knowledge in general has been crushed by calling people a witch. Why would humans do this? There's many reasons. Most of them relate to power and fear. Now, I also would say that those things go hand in hand, because in fear, the fearful require someone with power to solve the measure of vacuum for their fear, providing defense, even if there's no need, but rather for the belief. We've seen this time and time again in human history. It is a dangerous state of being, I would argue, mostly because some folks might take advantage of it. Some folks might see your... Ooh. Go to the clip, thank you. Some folks might see your weakness as their chance to jump on in and drop a spell on you, even if they're not a witch, while claiming you are. What is that spell? The spell is tribalized belief, drawn to anger, mob mentality, enough to burn people out of their homes. My apologies, I've had to go to a backup. And/or, in fact,
this channel is part of the History Hit Network.
It can even cause some people to turn in their own family.
400 years ago.
You will be hanged by the neck until you are dead.
Mass trials and executions erupted across the country. And the reason for this chaos and violence was witches. People were convinced
This channel is part of the History Hit Network.
Clips is being funny. Thank goodness I know where this is.
This is the British Isles 400 years ago.
You will be hanged by the neck until you are dead.
Mass trials and executions. But the subtleties of his bookish ideas were almost certainly lost on most of his subjects.
In
Like
England,
Brian Gunter,
we come to the story
They probably took demonology at face value.
of a young girl who turns in her mother at the age of 9. That girl stood on a table and called out to the judge that she had seen her mother in the dark committing to witchery and going off into the woods naked. She later implicated her own brother, a 12-year-old who also implicated their mother. Now, the interesting thing about this little girl was that almost 20 years later, a 10-year-old boy claimed to have seen her turn into a horse after she turned somebody else into an animal. And there was some kind of magic war he witnessed, and it was all believed, including him having to run away from a creature they had created in the battle. Now, was belief simpler then? Were they more open? Oh yeah, I'm here. Sorry, yeah, you following late? Did you lose my audio? No, I was turning and having a problem with the clip. Oh, did my,
I'm here.
Sorry, Zyrex. She turned you into a newt. Exactly, she turned me into a newt. Exactly. Oh, that's weird. Yeah, YouTube is I've been seeing some odd things happen on YouTube streams. And of course, right as I went, OBS decided to dump a bunch of my tech, so I've had to go do a backup. But there were many examples, by the way, of Families turning families in. And this is once again something that happens in a fear state. We also saw this not long ago in the 1970s in the Pol Pot regime of the Khmer Rouge, turning parents and educated people into the bad guys, the witches, pulled out of their homes, sent to re-education centers, which would inevitably lead them to the killing fields. It all sounds way too familiar when you think about the fact that every 100 years or 200 years in a cycle, we see a group of people focused on a fear state of others or xenophobia, someone to point at as mysterious and questionable because we don't know their intentions, we say. We should be afraid of this because sometimes the eyes turn on us even though we were the star witness. How convenient. Now, if one looks at the trial, in that case, we see a little girl likely manipulated by a judge and the barrister. And we also see a community turning on one another in fear that they might be next. And they don't want to be looked at. But in fact, at each time, in the end of the story, whatever it be, those in charge are always the ones found to be instigating, lighting fire. In other words, creating antagonism amongst the crowd. Yeah, I would agree. If you see a Xeno, feel free to call that a witch. And then burn it and run. Or just run. If you actually burn it first, please. Please, if you can. Spiritual warfare has always been underfoot. We live in a world that is transcendental, that others who aren't grounded in a spiritual realm themselves, in an understanding of faith of this semi-permeable existence. Well, those people, some may call them NPCs now, but I would say they are just non-believers. I would even argue they should have more faith that the universe and the omniverse and the metaverse is much more complex and compressed and wonderful. But that's not the story tonight. The story tonight is about Salem to start with. I don't know if you're familiar with the story, or the tragedy, I should say. I started explaining if I see a little gray Xeno, I'm calling it a witch. Yeah, I'm a nobody. I'm just, is there somebody threatening you? Oh, goodness. What's happening? Yeah. Please don't cover me. I've got kids. True. I have production people behind me. Actually, production animals. Sorry. In 1692, starting in February all the way to May 1693, once again, more than 200 people were accused of being witches. 30 were found guilty, 19 of whom were executed by what's called garroted hanging. That means that someone stood behind them, took them to a short grandstand that wasn't high enough for them to actually... Oh, Zyrax, did it go away? That's weird. I'm seeing it roll. That's very strange. I wonder if YouTube's doing something weird. Oh yes, Mystery Sky. It's something that we should all take note of, because it's not just a great spooky story of what can happen, and at a time period where, you know, there's only hearsay, and seeing it for yourself And the belief systems were a little different, because when I say rooted, I mean people lived off the land. They only saw what they saw. They could only know what they had read or what they had stumbled upon or been trained in. It was a different time period. One man amongst the 200, known as Giles Corey, died under torture, which was very common, actually, in the witch trials and in all the other phases of chasing people for their beliefs or practices. And witches have always been chased down, by the way, whether it be by the Catholic Church or by the priests and the locals, or by those who just saw an old lady with a hump on her back who didn't fit in. No, because I'm watching it down below. It was running the whole time. That's weird. It's running at high rate too. I think your feed might have been no bueno on your side. That sucks. Yeah, I've always got a reference on one side or the other. I've got a couple. So, they were called arrests. Just like, back in the day when McCarthy decided to start rounding up communists, or so he said. But it was really enemies lists of people who had spoken out, folks that had maybe ruffled feathers. The story is pretty much consistent across the board. It always seems to be the accuser is somebody who, well, they might have had an agenda otherwise, if you know what I mean. Not the best intentions for the folks they were accusing, As in, maybe they wanted to see someone fall and they knew the language that would incite the crowd. And so they took advantage of their position and created a mob mentality of fear for their own purposes. It's not uncommon. The examples are many. Our world is made up of those who would believe, those who want to be admired, those who want to rule, and those who just want to live. And sometimes those who just want to live, well, they will do anything, say anything to live. In the case of Salem, many people came forward. And it wasn't accidental. Because what this was a case of mass hysteria, my friends. When the Massachusetts state constitution was established in 1780, there were legislative and judicial records that showed the state's highest courts, although now renamed, was a continuation of a provincial court. So that means that during the American Revolution, court members who were appointed by royal governors were not by voting. So these people could be made up of religious leaders, local town mayors that were put into positions, and lords. These were positions of leverage. Oh, really? It was cut off. That's very odd. Sorry you experienced that. they were completely different. People had to fend for themselves in ways that you couldn't possibly imagine, I don't think. Everything had to be built by hand. Your pastor could very well be the landowner, simply because the church would own all the land, because it had founded the town. And that was the case in Salem. And many times in the story of the Salem witch hunts, you will find land ownership at some of the roots of the problem. Sorry, my page turned to my notes. The episode in Salem was a matter of a hunt for capital crimes. And it was an example of how people at an earlier time had actually been executed already for the crime of witchcraft. And that was used as, well, provenance for hunting the current one down. And how did that happen? Well, the trials were started after somebody got accused of being a witchcraft, primarily by two teenage girls, Elizabeth Hubbard, who was 17, and Dorothy Good. Oh, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. My notes are... Okay. The trials were started after people who had been accused of witchcraft. Primarily, yes, Elizabeth Hubbard, 17, was one of the accusers. This is correct. And Dorothy Good, yes, who was 4 or 5 years old when they brought her up to the stand. And by the way, it is odd because, as I've read, the British courts, the royal courts, and the general rule at the time was not to allow children... Oh, was you the whole time? Are you the witch? Yeah, the royal courts wouldn't allow children to testify, but here we are. Children on the stage, testifying in a court about what they had seen that ended up sending people to the gallows. Now, how do we substantiate that that is legal or rational? I don't think we can. I think the whole idea is that we start with an idea of fear on another shore, started by King James, and his idea of chasing after witches and cryptids and running them out of the land. And so the Book of Demonology by King James was the hand guide for most witch hunters of the time. So the earliest recorded or first witchcraft execution was that of a Alcee Young in 1647 in Hartford, Connecticut. And it mostly had to do with the fact that New England was started by religious people, pilgrims, who had very distinct beliefs in the unknown. And that anything that was unknown was Satan. Wow! Thank you, sir. Whoa! Hold on a second. Wow! Thank you. Where's my, hold on a second. Why didn't Stream Elements do anything? Yes, thank you so much. That's very kind. I appreciate you so much. Very cool of you. And I don't know why my alert didn't go off. I apologize. That's very weird. So I gave you a hand alert. Thank you for supporting the arts. And what I do keeps me going, and I add it into the quality of the show. looking to get a new piece of gear, actually. Thank you. And you'll see the difference. Quicker cuts. And of course, my notes totally got miffed tonight. So, Salem had been known for the fact that its population wasn't really a calm environment, that not everybody got along, that there were a lot of different beliefs and a lot of different kinds of people, but that it also had a political environment where the religious, those who owned the town, the church itself, well, they maintained control. And that's a problem for everyone in town. Because if you weren't one of those people who was actually a member of the church, well, you could be ousted, excommunicated, or called a witch. Maybe you didn't fit in. So, the church caused a lot of problems, and it was considered, the note is quarrelsome. The first two ministers, James Bailey and George Burroughs, each only stayed for a small time. And later on, Burroughs, 10 years later actually, was arrested during the witch hunt in another town. He'd been gone for 10 years, simply because a child was seeing his quote-unquote spirit in their dreams, they said. But mind you, this was after that child had been in the courtroom for some time, hearing others report about seeing spirits in the forest. Did it stop them from arresting him elsewhere? No, they pulled him out of his house while he was eating dinner with his family. He was subsequently executed after the trial. In other words, they hung one of their ministers after the fact as a witch, someone they trusted, someone who hadn't been in town for 10 years. But that didn't matter, because someone thought they saw his spirit killing someone else. Burn the witch, they said. It's one of the most common problems. Oh my. Oh no, and I'm still live. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm still running. I think the server out is giving you guys a hard time. I'm not sure what's going on. Weird. That's odd. Sometimes streaming, you never know what's going on the other side of the server distribution, so. Just so you guys know, I'm seeing quality on my side. All good, nothing weird, and I'm actually looking at the replay on in Cali, so if it's showing distribution weirdness elsewhere, I apologize. That's odd. Yeah, it must be on YouTube tonight. That's weird. Too bad, I apologize. Hopefully it'll correct itself at some point. Just in case I've killed StreamYard. StreamYard. Yeah, YouTube servers occasionally have an issue. It is black magic, after all. Yeah, odd, right? Something is going on. Yeah, because my site's running pretty sweet, actually. Strangely enough. But I am going to keep Streamyard off for a while because I don't need it for a minute. So unpin that. Despite the fact that the minister, George Burroughs, being dragged down from another town, his rights were still being upheld by the general court. And the current minister, at that time, only stayed for 4 years. It seemed there was some agreement about how much people were to be paid and what they would actually receive, which caused them to choose a man named Samuel Parris. And Samuel Parris is where the story really gets dark. Because you see, Parris had some disagreements over land with people. So when we look at the larger picture, we may see someone that had some ill will or intention that they didn't even have to share, but because of their position of authority as perceived, they got to, do what they want. And that can be dangerous for the entirety of the public. Because at any given time, that person in power, like Mr. Parris, could decide to go after anybody. And that could start with someone like Betty Parris, age 9, and Abigail Williams, age 11. They were the daughters and nieces of Samuel Parris, the town pastor, a member of the church, an owner of the village. The two girls began to fall into what they considered fits. They were described as beyond the power of epileptic fits or natural disease to affect by John Hale, a minister in a nearby town. These girls seemed possessed. They would throw things around the room. They would scream. They would contort. They would crawl under furniture, utter strange sounds. They would beat themselves. These are according to the eyewitness accounts. They complained repeatedly of being pricked and pinched. They were looked at by a doctor that we assume to be William Griggs, and he could find no physical ailment, which caused the village to go into uproar because the unknown, of course, is a vacuum. And we know that humans love to fill the vacuum. Now, not long later, after observing the two young girls going into these fits,
Favorite melodies. Hey, misbehaving.
sorry, even YouTube is being weird. Wow, turned the loop on and it just went back. After seeing these two girls in fits, many other young girls in town started experiencing these fits as well, which I find fairly interesting. You see, young women at the time were the last in line for everything. They were not looked at by their fathers. They were there to care for the family. They were there to do the chores. They were there to clean the house. They were there as extra help. Now, when these girls went into fits, we would presume, as recorded, that they no longer had to do their chores, that their fathers felt concerned and paid attention to them, that the whole town started grouping around them and wondering what was wrong and paying them mind. So you can imagine that an agenda might be formed. That is strange. That all the girls in town, teenage girls specifically, started falling ill with this affliction. Now, when these other young villagers started to exhibit these behaviors, Lawson preached as a guest in the Salem Village meeting house, and he was interrupted several times by these outbursts, as if to make example. So the first three people who were pointed out for allegedly causing this to occur were Sarah Good, who happened to be someone who helped the mothers of town birth their children. Sarah Osborne, also a wet nurse. And Tituba. Tituba was a native, a slave, held in the house of Paris. Samuel Paris, the preacher. So, it's believed that the accusation by Ann Putnam Jr. suggests that a family feud may have been a major cause by the witch trials. At this time, a rivalry was occurring between the Putnam and the Porter families, one which deeply separated Salem. See, just like online, people would stand in the corners and have heated debates, which escalated into full-fledged brawl, and based solely on their opinion of the feud. Sound familiar? Some of the physical symptoms resembled convulsive ergot poisoning. In other words, something you could come back from, but that would cause consistent symptoms. So specifically, the first woman accused was a homeless woman. She was accused because of her reputation. And she was accused because she had rejected the religious ideals of the town, both of discipline and self-control. And she chose, on many occasions, to torment, scorn. And the court said she did this instead of leading them towards the path of salvation. Sarah never attended church meetings. It appears that she was accused because the Puritans believed that Osborne herself had an agenda. Following the fact that she had married an indentured servant, the citizens of the town disapproved of her trying to control her son's inheritance from a previous marriage as well. What business it was of theirs? Well, what business is anybody's life, just like online? But hey, that never stopped anybody from intruding, right? And using it as leverage. Tituba, an enslaved South American Kalina woman from the West Indies, likely became a target of her ethnic differences from everyone else. Can't imagine what that would be. She was accused of attracting girls like Abigail Williams and Betty Paris, with stories of enchantment from Malleus Maleficarum, a story of witchcraft. These tales about the sexual encounters with demons swaying the minds of men, and fortune-telling were said to stimulate the imagination of girls and made Tituba an obvious target of accusations. So in other words, she was sharing information that she knew of lore and mysticism to wow the girls. That got reported as something wrong. Hello, Lizardry, how you doing? Welcome and good evening. We're talking about the witch hunts. And I'll soon be telling a story of my own experience with witchcraft. So each of the women who ended up being accused, turns out that they're outcasts. And they showed signs of what we would call the usual suspects for witchcraft. And in the end, they had to defend themselves because they generally had nobody. Later on, Martha Corey, the child Dorothy Good, and Rebecca Nurse in Salem Village, and Rachel Clinton in nearby Ipswich were all accused. See, Martha Corey, she showed some skepticism in the credibility of the girls who had originally charged Miss Good, and the charges against her and Rebecca Nurse deeply troubled the community because Martha Corey was a full covenant member, meaning that she was a member of the church. She owned the land, so her word had sway. I mean, if she could have been accused of being a witch, then anybody could be a witch. And that means nobody was protected. And the hunt is on. And the protection, the defense for life and death, well, that begins as well.
Spiritual development. However, one must be wary, as believing this journey to be brief could lead to false expectations.
False expectations. Believing that we know what cannot be known, but what we feel, we make reality when we hide in the dark. Or we capitulate to the worst desires and agendas of those who would pull the wool over our eyes simply because they want the whole group to agree and act as one. And that means even those in power can be called to task. Seriously, well, YouTube, you know. It hates my topics, I'm not gonna lie. It hates that I challenge its attempt to create the witch hunt, that I turn its algorithm upside down, and that I share. Now, mind you, I also did call Legba at the beginning, so that might be my own fault.
The fifth demon. A powerful demon Marvis governs over 36 legions of spirits, earning the title of a great president in the demonic hierarchy. The demon's abilities span the realm of hidden knowledge, diseases, and even the profound art of transformation.
Now, is it true? Could the witches transform themselves? Maybe. Did they get seen by the children of Salem? No, that's not what happened. No, what we're talking about was literal hysteria and a fad that likely the parents never caught on to. And then once someone got hung, well, the story was never going to be shared, and it was so easy to use as a tool of power and retribution and retaliation, fear of the unknown, of the monsters in the night that we perceive and think about. These were used against the people of Salem. People like Martha Corey, Dorothy Good, Rebecca Nurse, and Rachel Clinton, and many others, including 2 dogs apparently, were all treated to the end of a whip of people's fear en masse. See, when you were found to be a witch, it wasn't a simple affair. You didn't just get brought in handcuffs. No. First, you had to be examined. The examination was that of essentially what we would call an assault. You would be stripped, forcefully so, and every inch of your body would be reviewed, for the mark of the beast is said to be held under the hair. So oftentimes women's heads and men's heads would be shaved so they could look at every surface, and any blemish, any mark, including the one found on Sarah Good, on her private parts, because she was an elderly woman and they found a liver spot on her pelvis. Any marking could be considered the mark of the devil. In this case, yes, it does start with women, but it was not always that way. In the Inquisitions, men at large were seen to be carriers of the darkness, non-believers, minions of Satan, and Torquemada made sure that men who could fight wars were the first to be extinguished, burned, held on a spear as a welcoming mat. Since the beginning of time, man has sought to use the vacuum of the unknown as a fear state, if it in fact causes fear, just to make sure that his fellow humans, their fellow humans, fall in line. Because the unknown is powerful when you know that it means nothing, or that it's just ghosts, vapors, ideas, imagination, well played into the mind of man. Who would do such things? All kinds. Any human who seeks power, seeks the noble lore, seeks the noble lie. And sometimes just the lie. So, several women were arrested. Sarah Cloyce, Elizabeth Bassett Proctor, were arrested in April of that year of 1763. They were brought before John Hawthorne, the judge, and Jonathan Corwin at a meeting in Salem town. They were both magistrates, sorry. There was also a deputy governor there, and assistants from Samuel Sewell, Samuel Appleton, James Russell, and Isaac Addington. During the proceedings, objections by Elizabeth's husband, John Proctor. You're probably familiar with his name. He's one of the characters they talk about in the movies quite often, or they have portrayed in the movies. And over those objections, John Proctor was arrested. Within a week, Giles Corey, Abigail Hobbs, Bridget Bishop, Mary Warren, who was a servant in the Proctor household, and also an accuser, and Deliverance Hobbs were arrested and all of them examined. Abigail Hobbs, Mary Warren, and Deliverance Hobbs all confessed and began naming additional people. Fear is a powerful tool. More arrests followed after that. Sarah Wilds, William Hobbs, there's another Hobbs, who's the husband of Deliverance and father of Abigail, Nehemiah Abbott Jr., Mary Eastley, Edward Bishop Jr. and his wife Sarah Bishop, and Mary English, all arrested off the words of others. Accusations of fear. A reverend named George Burroughs was arrested on, the old reverend from the town that I told you about, was arrested on April 3rd. Lydia Dustin, Susanna Martin, Dorcas Hauer, terrible name, Sarah Morey, and Philip English, Mary's husband, were arrested. Nehemiah Abbott Jr. was released because his accusers agrees he was not the person whose specter had afflicted them. Oh, you didn't get the right specter. How did that go down? Mary Easty was released for a few days, apparently, because the accusers failed to confirm that it was her who had afflicted them, also. But she was arrested again later, because they recanted. Huh. Multiple warrants were issued before John Willard and Elizabeth Colson were apprehended. After a certain point, a special court was established called the Court of Oyer and Terminer for Suffolk, Essex, and Middlesex counties to prosecute the cases of those that were in jail. Warrants were issued for 36 more people, with more examinations to take place. Now, let me explain the examinations. They don't just look at your body. No, they need your confession, because the courts were different at the time. It was a different set of rules. They were royal courts, and generally the accused were given little deference and very little defense. Some of the tactics used to get confessions were torture, as Lizard Tree says, such as the thumb screw. Now, the thumb screw, if you're not familiar with it, was when they put your hand between two pieces of wood with a set of screws on either side. It's a fairly fancy device, actually, because you could turn the screws over your hand and it would slowly crush. And the more they would press, the more the bones and the skin and the muscle and the tendons would split, because they would compress the entirety of your fingertips and hand, resulting most of the time in losing fingers or breaking them all to the point of you not being able to use your hand again. Now, if that didn't convince you to tell them that you were a witch, there were other tests they could do, such as the binding. Now, the binding is something horrific. You would be wrapped with rope around the majority of the upper half of your body, and specifically around your chin and your head. And two men would take small boards and wrap the ends of the rope on either side of you around those boards and tie them off. And and they would each pull on those boards each time you were asked a question, tighter and tighter. The result being crushed skulls, laceration of the face, crushing your face, nose, cheekbones, jaw. And if you really didn't want to answer the questions, sometimes death. Because every once in a while, apparently, a rope would slip and they'd pull too tight and they would behead people by accident. The darkness in humanity seeking an answer while torturing, as if that's going to get them honesty. Well, humans, they fall to the darkness easily while pointing at others of being the monster, don't they? Think about it. Do you know monster? I think we've all known at least one. Now, how did we get to burning? Well, that took a trial. And when the trials happened, they were more like public displays, shows for the group of peanut-throwing, angry, frothing viewers, sitting in the pews, hoping for the worst, with little or no decorum. By the end of May, don't forget this really started in April, the amount of people being accused of witches in custody was 62. Some of the colonials were special kind of stupid, Lizardtree says, committing atrocity in the name of God, yes, which happens to be one of the most common factors in the Fearset case, that in the name of belief, faith, loyalty, quote-unquote honor, people commit atrocity. Just simply so that they're not excluded from the group. And that's what we see in Salem. Fear of being excluded, causing panic. All from what seems to be what we would call a troll. Not an actual cryptid troll, but a troll by a group of young women who figured out they could get out of their chores. And then once it got terrible, the stories and the behaviors couldn't be taken back. It was said that one of the judges received a letter from a member of his congregation. A man by the name of John Richards wrote on May 31st, 1692, that he supported the prosecutions, but he cautioned, do not lay more stress on pure spectral evidence than it will bear. It is very certain that devils have sometimes represented the shapes of persons not only innocent, but also very virtuous. Though I believe that the just God then ordinarily provides a way for the speedy vindication of the persons thus abused. In other words, be careful you pick the wrong people, because anyone could be a witch. But I trust in God that He'll make it right. In June, specifically June 2nd of 1692, the court of Oyer and Terminer convened. See, William Stoughton, the new lieutenant governor, was the chief magistrate. Thomas Newton was the crown's attorney. And Stephen Sewell was the clerk. Bridget Bishop's case was the first to be brought. the grand jury, who endorsed all of the indictments against her, meaning that when she came to court, she was already indicted and they were all endorsed as if the court believed. Bishop was described in court as not living a Puritan lifestyle. She wore black clothing and odd costumes. That was against Puritan code. Then she was examined before her trial. Bishop was asked about her coat, which had been awkwardly cut or torn in 2 ways. She was a witch because of her coat. This, along with her quote-unquote immoral lifestyle, they said, affirmed to the jury that Bishop was, in fact, a witch. And she was convicted on the same day that she went to trial. On June 3rd, the grand jury endorsed indictments against also Rebecca Nurse and John Willard, but they didn't go to trial immediately. Bishop was executed summarily on June 10th, 1692. Right after the execution, the court adjourned for a while, and they came back with a response. The afflicted state of our poor neighbors that are now suffering by molestations from the invisible world, we apprehend so deplorable that we think their condition calls for the utmost help of all persons in their several capacities. We cannot but, with all thankfulness, acknowledge the success which the merciful God has given unto the sedulous and assiduous endeavors of our honorable rulers to detect the abominable witchcrafts which have committed in this country, humbly praying that the discovery of those mysterious and mischievous wickedness may be perfected. We judge that in the prosecution of these and all such witchcrafts, there is need of very critical and exquisite caution, lest by too much credulity from things received only upon the devil's authority, there be a door open for a long train of miserable consequences, and Satan get an advantage over us, for we should not be ignorant of his devices. As in complaints upon witchcraft, there may be matters of inquiry which do not amount unto matters of presumption. And there may be matters of presumption which yet may not be made of conviction. So it is necessary that all proceedings thereabout be managed with an exceeding tenderness towards those that may be complained of, especially if they have been persons formerly of an unblemished reputation. So be careful, basically. When the first inquiry is made into the circumstances of such as many may lie under that just suspicion of witchcrafts, we could wish that there were maybe admitted as little as possible of such noise, company, and openness as may be too hastily expose them that are examined, and that there may no thing be used as a test for the trial of the suspected, the lawfulness whereof may be doubted among the people of God, but that the directions given by such judicious writers as Perkins and Bernard be consulted in such case. In other words, how to test a witch, go look at the book. Presumptions whereupon persons may be committed, and much more convictions whereupon persons may be condemned as guilty of witchcrafts, ought certainly to be more considerable than barely the accused persons being represented by a specter unto the afflicted, inasmuch that barely the accused persons being represented by a specter inasmuch as it is undoubted and notorious thing that a demon may, by God's permission, appear even to the ill purposes in the shape of innocent, yea, and of virtuous man. Nor can we esteem alterations made in the sufferers by a look or touch of the accused to be an infallible evidence of guilt, but frequently liable to be abused by the devil's legerdemains. We know not whether some remarkable affronts given to the devils by our disbelieving those testimonies whose whole force and strength is from them alone may not put a period unto the progress of the dreadful calamity began upon us. In the accusations of so many persons, whereof some, we hope, are yet clear from the great transgression laid unto their charge. Nevertheless, we cannot but humbly recommend unto the government the speedy and vigorous prosecution of such as have rendered themselves obnoxious according to the direction given in the laws of God and the wholesome statutes of the English nation for the detection of witchcrafts. Motherfuckers wanted some witches on a spike. Clearly. Later, the letter was summed up by Hutchins, the judge. The two first and the last sections of this advice took away for the force of all the others, and the prosecutions went on with more vigor than before. Let's see. From June 30th through early July, grand juries endorsed indictments against Sarah Good, Elizabeth Howe, Susanna Martin, Elizabeth Proctor, John Proctor, Martha Carrier, Sarah Wilds, Dorcas Hoare. I apologize, Dorcas. That's how you spell that. Dorcas Hoare. And yeah, I'm going to leave it with I'm going to leave it that way. They just didn't like Dorcas. Sarah Good, Elizabeth Howe, Susanna Martin, and Sarah Wilds, along with Rebecca Nurse, went to trial at this time where they were all found guilty. All 5 women were executed by hanging on July 19th, 1692. In mid-July, the constable in Andover invited the afflicted girls from Salem Village to visit his wife to try to determine who was causing her afflictions. Ann Foster, her daughter, Mary Lacey Sr., and a granddaughter, Mary Lacey Jr., all confessed to being witches. Anthony Checkley was appointed by Governor Phipps to replace Thomas Newton as the Crown's attorney when Newton took an appointment in New Hampshire. Something else that I have to know. When the trials were going on, one of the tricks that was being used is that they would bind the accused hands. Now, when the hands were unbound, the girls would start screaming out in the courtroom that they were being pinched and prodded and go into the afflictions that they spoke about. But when the hands of the accused were rebound, the girls would stop the fits. And that was proof enough in most cases. So when they say they were adjudicated and found guilty, I think we can fairly say that that just isn't the truth, because magic was used in the courtroom, as we would call it now, or acts of conning. Is that a trial? Or is that a show? Either way, the outcome was real. Isn't it amazing how that can happen? How the fantasy can be made real by those who wish simply to ignore what can hurt others because they wish for some kind of power. Or they wish to move the crowd under their word. Or maybe they just wish to end up with land, other people's property. How do we know? We don't. All we can know is the outcome caused by the calamity and the accusations. In one day, 7 women hanged by their neck. hung on a short gallows. It was reported often that family members would yank or pull on the legs of those being hung to quicken the death. Mostly because the ropes weren't short enough to let them break their necks. Now, in England, when it came to how they disposed of witches, they would tie them to the stake. They would wrap them in bindles of sticks. And they wouldn't light them on fire immediately. That was actually considered too cruel. They would stand behind them and take a garrote, which is a piece of wood with a string or a rope attached, and they would strangle the witches from behind with the garrote, which they considered more reasonable, more humane, before they burned them. Although it is also reported that many times they would just simply, in a rural town, wrap them up against the post and burn them. Or, if they really wanted to know if they were a witch and they weren't telling them, and none of the other usual tests were working, they would see if they floated, which had a 100% ratio of making sure they found witches who would sink. Easy test when you're looking to get rid of a problem, or to make yourself seem feared. Taking the worst possible route to impress upon the crowd that the rules broken in any way, shape, or form, even if it's just the appearance of the rule being broken, gets the worst possible outcome. Boo to you and good evening! Hello, Queen, welcome. I appreciate you for being here. What causes people to be in fear of their neighbor? The unknown. The unknown being that anyone could be someone that has ill intention towards you, or that you can't trust. And it so easily takes root in the back of some folks' minds when they maybe have too much time on their hands. Which, by the way, the binding of the hands, that relates to the old statement that idle hands, the devil's playground. That's because manipulation of your hands, symbols, specifically those that they didn't understand, could be considered manipulation that would terrorize others, pinches and pokes. The devil worked through your hands, in their minds. And I think we know that it's the devil in the details that actually makes the difference. The year was 1993. I had been successfully running my PA around Los Angeles County, working for hip-hop in underground clubs and hip-hop scenes, as far as like comedy, like the Spike's Comedy Exchange. And I had been working a lot, mostly solo. And I had a trailer behind a Jeep Cherokee where I'd throw my PA, which was a pretty large beast at that time period, because PAs aren't as compact as they are now. And I was a young man, so I had the energy, verve, and spoons. I was down. Every once in a while I'd have a helper if it was a big show, but most of the time I just do it on my own. Easy money, a lot of fun. Late nights. And I got into the habit. Yes, Lizard Tree, tons of nerves in your hand, true. So I got into the habit of being a terrible neighbor in a duplex in the San Fernando Valley, specifically in North Hollywood, in the early 90s. So, I'm a very young man living in a 2-bedroom duplex apartment by myself. The second bedroom was where I stored all the gear. And I would bring the gear in, this big lunky thing, at 2 or 3 in the morning. And I'd hook it up real quickly and hook up a CD player and test the speakers, being a jackass. Bumping and grinding. Sometimes I listen to some music. I mean, it's in the second bedroom. So what is a duplex? Well, one thing that I didn't notice at the time, despite having a deep interest in the occult, having read a lot of mythos, having researched at that time, and still deeply reading my library of theology and anthropology, and archaeology, and some grimoire, I should have known better. Because in the backyard, behind the back duplex apartment, was a massive herb garden. An incredible, massive herb garden, well organized and maintained. And in the center of it was a fire pit. And above that fire pit were several, well, let's call them mobiles. Those mobiles were what I now know to be protective figurine, stick figures of the Wiccan, warning signs of sacred ground. Now, I should have known better. I should have asked my neighbors. But I was a young man, and I just assumed space was space. So I went ahead and planted some weed plants and a couple other things in some pots and put them back in the back. Ooh, lovely. Yes, please do check out Queen's new Spirit of Rebellion. That sounds neat. Your chat disappeared on you. YouTube is going nuts. Does not like my topic. It's like, no, don't tell that story, please. So, I've planted some plants that don't belong in a garden that doesn't belong to me. But I didn't know because I'm in a duplex and I was kind of young and we all make mistakes and cross boundaries just to see what happens when I didn't even know I was looking to see what happens. And I went about my business, testing my PA loud early in the morning as I came back from work. Checking in on my weed plant in the back. Being an ass neighbor. Now I knew the neighbor next door was a gentleman also named Aaron. Kind of thick, buff, short man who had a large, and I mean tall, and burly lady friend roommate. And I don't particularly remember her name. Now, it's odd that I remember his name. Not just because it's mine, but that I remember him vividly. But her, if I saw her again, I wouldn't recognize her, even though she sat in my living room more than once. She came over, offering to smoke with me. I should have declined. The first time, she was polite, conversational. I asked if there was any way I could wait till the next day, once I explained to her that I had to test my PA, and she said, it's very loud, if you could turn it down. I said, well, yeah, it's hard. And I gave her some weak excuse and some stupid shit, like a kid does, you know, defensive. She was very nice, actually, when I think back about it. She left. Sometime later, I received a letter through the door, requesting again that I not do it. That I stop making the noise late at night. And, of course, I ignored that. Yes, sometimes Lizard Tree is probably best to decline. So, I get this letter. And a couple days later, I see Aaron in the back driveway, not far from the plants. And he's walking up with my plants in his hand, and he shoves them into mine. He says, "These don't belong in my garden. You've crossed boundaries with us. Just know there will be action." All right, buddy. Wow, what does that mean? Well, a day or two goes by, and I decide I'm going to be funny. And I bring my PA home late at night, and I had a CD of sound effects, and specifically this one sound effect that was called 50-Foot Snail Crushes Houses on Suburban Street. And that's exactly what it was. 2 minutes of what sounded to be like a 50-foot snail crushing houses with screams and car horns and house-crushing sounds and snail sounds. And I proceeded to test this on my PA, as loud as my PA would go at 3 a.m. And all I did was play that for 2 minutes, and then I turned it off. No other sound, just that. Out of nowhere, in the middle of the night. I am more than sure that people woke up and shat themselves. Because it was a scary set of noises. The screaming and the honking and the crashing and the crunching. Yeah. The slurping of the snail sounds. Yes. Yes. Well, next day, I got a knock at the door. And it's the lady who lives there. She asked if she can come in. I said, "Sure, come on in." She sat down on the couch with me and offered me some smoke again. I said, "Sure," but this time, she said, "Cool, well, this is a peace offering because I'm going to ask one last time. Whatever you're doing, you need to stop it. Because Aaron's pissed." I said, well, sorry, it's what I do. She said, "Well, you need to stop. Respect your neighbors." Oh, okay. So we smoked, and she used the bathroom. She has to use the bathroom, which I thought was odd. And then she left. Well, not long later, I found on my doorstep a strange little bundle. Had some of my hair, a couple sticks, and some herbs, and what looked to be a little splatter of wax on some paper. And in that wax, it looked to be like ashes were mixed in. It was an odd little thing to find on my doorstep. And to be frank, I shouldn't have touched it. I know now. Now, I didn't have any more interaction with my neighbors, and I managed to calm myself and stop doing that shit. But also, I ended up getting a roommate, so that did help to keep me from blasting music at 3 a.m. But unfortunately, this did not stop the occurrence of what they set upon me. And I didn't know for several years. Not until I met a man named Hiram Bingham, the owner of a shop called Panpipes in Hollywood. When I had sought out the advice and mentorship of someone more knowledgeable in the world of the occult, in the unknown, in the hunt for spirits, spooks, demons, goblins, and ghouls, for someone experienced in the states of altered perception. And in Hiram, I found all of these things for a time. A mystic, a master of the art, a wise man, an enigma, and a man who may not have even been who he said he was. But either way, one thing he had was a gift. See, Hiram could see through the veil. How or why, maybe it was a gift. YouTube can be very much a conduit. And I'm going to share, actually, something of that this evening again. And don't let me forget to show you who I believe Fulcanelli is. If you're not familiar with the story of Fulcanelli, the last real warlock or wizard known to us all beyond Benro, but a living, breathing, never-ending man who may have found the Philosopher's Stone and then disappeared. Well, I believe I may have found him online, but that's just a theory at this time. I have made contact. I've shared him before. He's known as Thoth9393. But I do find that the imagery and the lessons in his videos are nothing less than stunning if you know what you're looking at, because it is grimoire in the most modern of fashions, in the most complex of ways, and it embeds itself inside of you. Essentially, with binaural video and audio, he trains you in the metaphysical world, embedding code. It is a conduit. YouTube is a space where we can find many stories for certain. So Hiram tells me, the first time he sees me, that I brought a guest into his store. And I didn't know what he meant. I thought he was being polite, since somebody walked in not long later after I had. He said, when I asked him, I said, you mean the other customer? He said, no. I mean, you brought somebody into my store, son, and you don't even know they're hanging out. What do you mean by that? And he said, you wouldn't be able to see them. That's part of the problem. You wouldn't even know they're there. But they're going to be dragging behind you until you take care of that. Okay. What does that mean, man? He described what some may know as the Shinigami. A spirit of death and dream. There are many names for it. Shadow people, like I was talking about the other night. There are many different cultural beliefs. But the Shinigami is the best description of such, because this is a tall, likable creature who means no ill will, but rather carries with it a wake of trauma and troublesome behavior. That it is bad luck that can be placed as familiar on someone else's shoulder until they correct their own behaviors or actions, or unbind themselves from this dream creature. Now, how does this creature attach itself? Well, I learned that it is basically pointed at you, and once you touch the thing that anoints yourself and binds yourself to that familiar, it is there with you until you break that bind. Now, binding can only be broken by correcting the action. By the time I found out that there was something following me around, causing me to be held down, essentially, in my experiences on every level. What's happening, Brother Jumbi? How you doing? Good evening. When I found out that something was holding me down, it was far too long past the point of where I no longer lived next door, and I didn't know where they were, so I couldn't have apologized to correct. And it took me years to figure it out. And in that time, what I found was an unexplainable rise and fall that I was allowed, where not only was I suppressed for a good amount of time, that I had to work 3 times as hard to make anything happen. Whereas before, my efforts were always reciprocated by the universe, quickly. Now, I've had other stories that caused me concern for the changes in environment and, let's say, Mandela experience. But this was a direct suppression of my luck, my vibration, my mojo. Now, some years go by, and I learn of a Santeria practitioner who can see beyond the veil. And I'm given this person's number. And I called them, and I asked them if they knew how I could rid myself of a guest. And they said that I should come to them and consult, that I need to bring tribute. I asked them how much it would cost, and they said, no pay for this. Bring tribute and change the practice. But first they had to see what was really ailing me. And when I went to their storefront, herbalist shop, they took me into a back room. It seemed to be a storage space of some nature, and an office. And when they sat me down in the office across from me, they immediately looked over my shoulder, raised an eyebrow, and asked me how long the large figure behind me had been following me. And at that point I said, years. And they said, this should be easy. Who have you wronged? And I, at that point, said, Benny. And they said, yes, but who could sick this upon you have you wronged? And I thought about it, and the story of the neighbors came up in my mind very clearly. And he said, hold them in your mind. Hold them dear. Send your image to them, apologizing on your knees, in humble state. Show them in spirit that you've changed your ways. Break the binding, break the bond, break the pattern. Now, it took me some time, and it wasn't done in that session. And in fact, I had to do it on my own, in the quiet of a special space. But once I did that clearly, once I relieved myself of my own burden, my guest, the tall looming figure behind me, holding me down, basically, stifling my future, walked away. And I felt all the pressure release. And not long later, while sweeping a stage at a rehearsal room, someone came up to me and asked me if I knew how to do monitors, and I said yes, and they said, great. Come join us with Snoop Dogg. And although I'd worked for Warren G before, we hadn't toured. Not really. Couple venues, but. And I was accepted in. And I overcame the hurdles. And I don't know if that would have happened before. I let myself change and let that thing, whatever it was, go. It just goes to show, be kind to your neighbors. Because truly, even though most of them aren't witches, some of them very may well be. Yeah, where is Song Wang? Have they not come back yet? I'm concerned. Did Song Wang not come back? They came in, then left, and didn't come back? Good Lord. I hope you're okay, Song Wang. I hope a witch has not sicked you with any kind of scary binding to a Shinigami. That would suck. The lesson is, one, don't fuck with your neighbors. Pop in and drop a line. Yes, I enjoy Song Wang. Song Wang has an amazing story that I can't share right now. But I actually have spoken with Song Wang once. That's the hilarious portion. And it wasn't the conversation that we had here. It's amazing. It's a whole amazing thing. Now I'm going to take a brief break, pause for the cause, feed the producers, probably wash my hands, use the wash closet, grab a snack, throw back another caffeinated beverage. But on the way back in, after the video you're about to see, we'll be covering a whole other kind of witchery. The story of Andrea Yates, a woman who drowned her own 5 children because of her religious beliefs and because she thought that they were going to hell. So don't go anywhere. When we return, we're going to look at confusion and the actions of evil in what can only be described as an avatar. The use of a mother by her own psyche to destroy her own love and life because she feared her paranoia and fell ill to it. Don't fall to the dark while I'm gone. And if you do, look up. I'm AronMSound, and this is Look Up, the show where I interject myself into a conversation I wasn't asked to join. And today, I get to give you some mental sherbet, where I take myself out of the sludge and drudge of the battles down in Genderville, and I come up for a little explanation, a perspective that some people may not be aware of. And if you're not in the world of science, or you don't study quantum physics, or you're not interested in that kind of nerdery, geekdom, like myself, then you would just take everything at face value. Maybe. Possibly. Not saying that you do. I am just basically saying, that there is more to the picture than you may think, because perspective about dimension and nuance is not just everything in interaction and interpersonal relationships and in how we view things, but it's also in how we build the environment around us. Now, I'm not going to go into the double slit experiment. He said slit. The double slit experiment today, or explain how protons are matter and how that works in comparison to neutrons, and how there's a W boson and several other bosons, including the Higgs boson. I'm not going to explain how an atom works because I expect that most of you watching paid some kind of attention in one of the many science classes that you hopefully took. Otherwise, please, there is so much information available out there that can just enrich your brain with food and just shove it on in there. Just shove it in your brain. Because it makes your brain swell in a good way. Not the Bruce Lee, I took out my sweat glands and now I can't sweat and I'm going to end up passing away for making that choice. And now we've lost Bruce Lee, kind of swelling. Look it up. It sucks. It's the worst thing I have ever come to learn. Thanks, History Channel. Man, this is what I'm talking about. Ego can make you make some really wildly stupid decisions. Because we all love to quote, be like water. Be like water. Yeah, I would love to be like water, but he didn't want to be like water. He had his glands taken out. Anyways, how did I end up talking about this? I have no clue. Maybe it's because I'm watching too much information. I need to go back to reading too much information. I don't, honestly. I don't. I just was buried in books. At some point, I'll bring my bookshelves in. The studio's so bare right now, and I'm not endorsing anything you see behind me. It's just, you know, when you travel and tour, and you can't see like all my tour passes. They're somewhere. There they are. There's a tree of passes that it's literally a tree. At some point, I'll put it up in view so it can be seen. Right now, it's attached to lighting that gives me this lovely youthful glow. Hello. Growl. Anyhow, let's talk about reality, folks. Let's talk about perspective. And if you've never seen this before, I'm excited to share it with you because, like I said, it's mental sherbet comparative to the things that you and I have been sharing. It's so far outside of the Pearlyverse, outside of their perspective. I think that this would be heresy because it makes you think about things outside of a limited a limited viewpoint. It literally makes you think about the other dimensions around you. And I would pose that this is a good thing. This is a healthy thing. Because it's too often in humanity that we don't appreciate how much more is going on. And I won't bore you or make your eyes glaze over with the details of the weirdness right now, because they'll become apparent to you as we move along. I will add more, but this is the beginner's class in weirdness of reality. I give you my reaction to Turdunctor. This is why I don't edit. Because it's better. It's better this way. And you know it. You know it! By the way, I am excited. I plan on bringing a youthful favorite of mine on. I found it. It's called Shadow Vision. If you want to prep, the great Shadow Stevens. It's on his channel. It's all one word, and it's Shadow with an E. Anyhow, you're an asshole, and you know it. Just a lot of how we see imagery and just video as we know it comes out of this 1980s thing that somebody showed me on VHS when I was 14, and it warps. It will warp your mind because it's so weird. The more you see it, the more you laugh at it, because it takes that long. You have to watch it a bunch to even get the humor. It's so advanced. It's alien humor for real. But then again, Shadow Stevens, interesting character. And I think he's got a show on right now. If you're not familiar with him, go. His stuff. I personally haven't listened to the most recent stuff, but I have listened to his material before, and he's a great storyteller, and he's also a great pontificator on the same things I talk about, except he takes it to the other dimensions and really thinks about the nature of the universe in a philosophical way. He also has an amazing, very strange voice. And you might see a little bit, you might see me, just a little, emulating him just a little bit. That's because I grew up around radio people, though. For real. Yep. Radio. That's the one that that I was gonna say in your car, but it's when nothing else works in your car. It's that one that says AM and FM. I know you don't listen to it, but 101 point. Yeah, never mind. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I give you. Ladies and gentlemen, hobos and tramps, cross-up mosquitoes, and bull-legged ants. I give you Dr. Quantum, Flat World. Oh, what? I'm supposed to press the button. Okay, there's no one there, by the way. That's just me telling me. Press the button. Yeah! Dr. Quantum visits Flatland. Yay! From the DVD, Down the Rabbit Hole, which I would suggest go getting if you're not familiar with this stuff, and if you're into quantum physics and you like smarty pants stuff. Smarty pants. Woo! Yeah! All right. Why is everything so trippy all of a sudden? Hey, he can fly, and he's a nerd. Oh.
A world of only two dimensions.
Okay.
Only forwards and backwards, left and right.
Oh.
In this world,
Binary
there
thought.
is no up and no down.
Because binary. Because there is black and white and nothing else.
He said, well, she's out in line.
Oh, you get what he's saying there? I'm going to shrink myself.
In this world, the two-dimensional beings that live here know the concept of three-dimensional objects. These two-dimensional flatlanders have no understanding of cubes, spheres, tetrahedrons, or yours truly.
Little tiny
In
you!
2D perspective, my 3D finger looks something like this.
Ooh, it's a big ass finger now! It looks like a huge blockage to the little circles, squares, and triangles. Ah, it's a blockage! Super nerd!
Hello, little circle.
Hey, circle. Okay, now I want to stop for a second because what? Oh, goodness gracious me! Holy mercy! Wow, that would frighten anything. You look up into space and that's looking at you. A nerd in a super suit? I'm concerned. All right. Anyhow. Yeah, I'm thrown off by yes. What the bleep? Amazing DVD of information. And great. This isn't just like, oh, it's pontificating. It's thinking about, no, this is science. These are facts and still currently up to date and accepted information that we can trust. Pretty cool. Yeah. Anyhow. So what he's about to talk about is everything to do with perception and perspective. And it's coming from the very scientific viewpoint of actual perspective and dimension. But it does apply to our own thoughts and the way we see the world around us. And that's why I'm stopping it right here, because before I move on, I have to say that this is the best way to explain how you can see outside of your own box if you understand that there is an outside of your own box. I said box, that's right. And he's about to put his finger in it. The box. Dr. Quantum's gonna put his finger. Anyways, all right. And here we go.
Fear of the unknown. Or
Oh,
should
yeah,
I
you have
say,
it.
not yet known.
Not yet,
It's a
no, that's
puzzle.
right.
If we see only what we know, how does anyone ever see anything new? The unknown. How do we ever get out of our box?
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! How often have I been saying this? How often have I been saying this? Now we're saying it in the direction of science that says we live in a dimension where there's more than this, and that there's actually more in the universe than just what we perceive. And he's about to show you that if you didn't know any better, you would think that it's only what you look at and only what you're surrounded by, but there's more to it. He's about to blow this Pac-Man's little tiny mind. He's about to melt this Pac-Man and make it a messiah of Pac-Mans, because that Pac-Man then becomes universally knowledgeable, attains true enlightenment. No, it's for real. This is real. This is science. This is fact. And you too can pull the wool over your own eyes and miss the whole thing. And miss the enjoyment and acceptance and view that you get when you stand outside. When you smash the box that holds you in your little tiny frame. Because your prison's so pretty. Because you built your prison so you want it to be pretty. Well, guess what? There's no roof to your box. And you're about to find out that that's true in a universal, omniversal, multiversal sense. And here's why.
Circle? Don't be afraid.
Oh, don't be afraid, little Pat girl.
Where are you?
This is always the tricky part to explain. I'm in another dimension, another space. I am above you.
Stranger danger!
Never use that word.
What word?
Never use the
Above.
Anal? No, he says above. Above. She's afraid of what's above her. Sound familiar? Look familiar? Don't ever use the A word. What's above you? Oh. Oh, she doesn't want to look up. Well, that's weird. It's because she's afraid of the unknown. And I would say, and I would argue, that that is why all of these other shows are preaching what they're preaching, is because they're actually afraid of what they don't know and what they're not willing to explore for. In dating, in life, in everything. In enjoyment of the experience, in the sentient experience, in 3 and 4 and 10D. But, I'm sorry. Let me let Dr. Nerdy here scare the little Pac girl a little bit further. As in, Pac-Man girl. He's just totally destroying her entire concept of life. She's probably going to commit suicide after this because she attains enlightenment and just runs off into a volcano or something. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. It has a happy ending. Enlightenment is good for you. Smartness is good for you. It is good for the brain. Okay. I say that patronizingly because sometimes people need it fed to them with a little spoon. All right.
Well, what do you think it means?
I don't know. And I don't want to know.
She doesn't
You could
wanna
be
know.
severely punished if you use that word. Are you a ghost?
No, honey.
God.
I'm a
I
god.
just have a different perspective than you do. I can see things in a way you can't yet.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, because, okay, and this is an amazing thing he says. I have a different perspective than you do, and I can just see things in a way you can't yet. Not that you can't see it, but that you can't see it yet. You have to be able to be allowed or allow yourself to see above you, below you, and beyond the limited dimensions of what you might think you're held to. And I'd apply that to just about anything. Because that's the con in basic everyday life and in the ideas that are being thrown around so randomly on this use of the tubes. That somehow life and experience is this limited thing that has a rule book, and that if you don't follow this rule book from 1955 to 1962, failure. You don't fit in. You won't succeed. When I would argue all day long and stand on that hill that it is a multiplexed, a very complex, a nuanced interaction with a complex universe, omniverse, multiverse, that we haven't even begun to broach the conversation or experience of as the species of human. And our potentials haven't even begun. That someday, 1,000,000 years from now, we will look at the line of humanity and we'll be something else then, and we'll look back at us now and talk about us as if we were Cro-Magnon. Oh yeah, we'll be talking shit. Homo sapiens currently are still evolving, and we will as long as we survive. We might even integrate into technology. It looks like we're heading that way. So the portion of us that allows us to adapt is that thing that perpetrates our success. So I would even argue that adaptability is the most successful trait. Knowledge being the most valuable asset. Because that's the only way you ever adapt. By gaining knowledge and growing like a good little sponge, and you go, that's your brain. I'm sorry. Let's get back to the scared, the really freaked out Pac-Man girl. Okay.
Well, okay. You have a safe hidden in your pantry.
Oh, he's playing God now.
You have 12 coins, a will, and a passport.
That's because he can see what she cannot, because he's looking at things from a different perspective. He's looking down into a world she can't perceive of him above. She wouldn't have perceived him until he came over and made her aware that he existed above. And this is real in everyday life. Because this is going on in our life. There's so many things.
Hell
Just
yeah,
like
lizard
you
tree.
walk down the street, you may live somewhere. Let's say you live in New York or Los Angeles or in a large city like Seattle, or you've lived there your whole life and you've walked down the street your whole life, and maybe there's a little store or a restaurant that you just never noticed in the nook. And you've lived there your whole life. It's been there your whole life. You come to find out. How did you miss it? Well, you just didn't have the perspective to look over that day. Or perspective to look before that day. My apologies. So, take into consideration that each one of us, until somebody, some big super nerd, the size of the Empire State Building, floats over us and goes, hey, You there. It helps us find that other perspective. That's not likely to happen, so we have to do it for ourselves. Which is why I always suggest people study philosophy. Or at least read about it. Look into it, think about it, have the discussions about the things that make you uncomfortable. Because we don't grow, we don't actually stretch our limitations without thinking of the things that make us uncomfortable and thinking them through fully. Because you might be surprised how many strange conclusions you will come to when you really think them through. And that's amazing because life is strange. The universe is strange. Dr. Quantum, kind of weird. Why are you looking at her safe, Dr. Quantum? That's a little creepy.
How did you know that? What are you? Are you a god?
Well, no more than you.
Nope.
You see, since I am above you, in the third dimension, I can see inside things in your world.
Wait.
Third dimension?
Ooh,
You are a
what's
crazy
that?
ghost. There's only two. Look.
So, if I were to touch the inside of your stomach, how would I do
touch
that?
that side of that two-dimensional
You'd
stomach.
have to cut through my skin.
Creepy.
Otherwise, it's impossible.
Oh.
Stop!
Yeah, doctor. Yeah, doctor, touch that. Oh,
Ready for more?
More what?
Dimensions.
more what?
Oh,
Yeah, are you ready? Are you
no.
ready for more
Yes,
dimensions?
but
Are
there
you?
aren't any.
Yes, there are.
More?
There's more.
What will happen to me? What will I become?
You have to
relax.
become it to know.
Exactly. You have to become it
Okay.
to know, but you have to allow yourself to become it. Like she says, okay, consent. Let me just rub my hands and pull you up out of your reality and put you up on top and make you three-dimensional later. Now you're a marble in the sky. Wow, yeah, right?
I never knew.
See? See? But you could, you just have to allow yourself to become the moon in the sky like a marble. Come on, get your bed. Yeah! Oh! All right. All right.
Isn't it
Wow, that
funny?
was...
That which we are most afraid of
Oh.
is what thrills us the most.
Truth. 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 That is a great explanation of other perspectives and how you two can pull the wool over your own eyes. If you don't, look up at what's, dare I say, above you. Ah!
On June 20th, 2001, Houston police received a 911 call from a normally quiet section of town.
What's your name? Andrea Yates. What's the problem? I just need him to come. Is your husband there? No. So what's the problem? I need him to come. I need to know why we're coming, ma'am. Is he there standing next to you? She? Are you having disturbance? Are you ill or what? Yes, I'm ill. You need an ambulance? No, I need a police officer. You have sent an ambulance.
Andrea, can you tell me your full and complete name?
Andrea Yates,
And how old are you?
36,
And what's your home address?
942 Beachcomber, Houston, Texas, 77062.
Okay. And you and I have been talking for a while, right?
Yes,
You understand your rights?
yes,
Okay, I'm going to read them to you again for the purposes of this recording, okay?
okay,
And you have a right to remain silent, not to make any statement at all, and that any statement you make may be used against you and probably will be used against you at your trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Any statement you make may be used as evidence against you in court. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You have a right to have a lawyer present to advise you prior to and during any questioning. Do you understand that?
Yes.
If you are unable to employ a lawyer, you have a right to have a lawyer appointed to advise you prior to and during any questioning. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And you
June 20th, 2001. Andrea Yates calls 911 to report that she needs the police. The operator on the other side asks her what's wrong. She says, "You just need to send someone." She says, "Are you ill?" Andrea Yates says yes. The operator asks, "Do you need an ambulance?" She says, "No, send the police." And yes, do send an ambulance. And the recording cuts off. On that day, June 20th, 2001, the woman you were looking at, Andrea Pia Yates, born July 3rd, 1964, drowned individually in her motorhome bathtub. Her 5 children, one at a time, Andrea Yates took them to the bathtub and drowned them. Now, I should have warned you ahead of time. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Trigger warnings. In that you are looking at the banality of evil, the face of a monster who was turned to a monster by her own mind and the chemicals her doctor prescribed. You see, Andrea Yates drowned her children on June 20th, 2001, not simply because she had postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis, but rather because she had had an influenced schizophrenia allowed to occur by a psychiatrist who had not referred to her prior treatments or her husband's request to return her to the medication she'd previously been on, but rather her current psychiatrist at the time of this video had doubled down and then tripled down on the medications that were ineffective. After it had been discovered that she had schizophrenia leading up to the murders, it was also discovered that she had the irresistible impulse to test for sanity, meaning to prove herself. At the trial, the district attorney in Harris County asked for the death penalty, as would be understood in the situation that such a horrific incident. Instead, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. And I'm going to bury the lead after I tell you the story. Andrea, the lady you're looking at right now. Hello, Resto. What's happening, Arctic Timberwolf? What's going on? We have come to the portion of the evening where we're taking a good look at someone who could be considered a witch, and who in actuality went on a witch hunt of her own, in her own home, with her own children, determined to not allow her children to become evil, to go to hell. Andrea Yates made sure that she had the final say. Yates was not an uneducated person. As a matter of fact, the person you see in this video here, stoic, and in some cases referred to as a psychotic or uncathartic state. This is not the person that started her life. This is not the person who decided to have the children. This is not the person she was before her 5 children caused her postpartum depression to go out of control. She was born Andrea P. Kennedy in Houston, Texas. She was the youngest of 5 children. Her mother was a German immigrant. Her father was an Irish immigrant. Yates, throughout her life, suffered from bulimia, depression, and she often spoke to friends about suicide. She graduated high school in 1982. She was the class valedictorian. She was an officer in the National Honor Society. She created and completed a 2-year pre-nursing program at the University of Houston. She graduated from University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston as a nurse. From 1986 until 1984, she worked as a registered nurse. During that time, in about 1989, she met her future husband, Rusty Yates, a NASA engineer, at her apartment complex. They soon moved in together and were married in April 1993. One of the main portions of the story you should know is that the person we're looking at was a devout religious person, that they believed very deeply in an evangelical sect of Christianity. One that essentially posed to its followers that no one except its leaders were going to heaven. Now, this belief also centered around having as many babies as nature would allow. So they bought a 4-bedroom house in Friendswood, Texas. Their first child, Noah, was born in 1994, just before Rusty accepted a job in Florida, which caused them to relocate to a trailer in Seminole. By the time they had their 3rd child, Paul, they'd moved back to Houston and purchased a motorhome. Now, mind you, that is 3 children and 2 adults living in a motorhome. I want you to think about that again. Do you have children? Have you been around them? Do you know the stresses of working and taking care of children, much less the limitations of space of a 300 square foot living environment? The pressure must have been building.
You have a right to terminate this interview anytime.
Yes.
You've been treated for depression, is that right?
Yes.
And who's your current doctor?
Dr. Said.
And the last time you saw him?
Two days ago.
Okay. This morning, what time is it that you got out of bed this morning?
About 8:10.
Okay. And who in your household was awake at that time?
My husband, Mary, Luke, and Paul.
Okay. And what time does Rusty leave for work?
He left about 9.
After she had her 4th child, her depression came back in a way that can only be described as postpartum depression. Something that you shouldn't take for granted. It has been caused by simple things in a woman's body. But it can cause immense and long-term trauma and terrible outcomes for a woman who doesn't treat it or isn't supported for its treatment. It can change the entire psyche of the person you love right in front of your eyes, simply because it's not treated. If you know someone who is experiencing postpartum depression, manic depression, depressive episodes, episodes of psychotic reactions, unregulated emotional states of being, delusional concepts, fighting windmills, please make sure they contact the correct people to get the correct help, whether it be psychiatric or just someone to listen to. Sometimes that's more than is needed. Anyhow, taking people seriously is part of the problem. In this world, sometimes the call to authority is missed by the authority itself because, at least in Andrea Yates' case, the person she was calling the authority out to wasn't paying any attention. Her doctor, at the time period, never referred to her prior psychiatric reviews or any of the prescriptions or any of the diagnosis. That's not just problematic, that's against the rules. And by rules, I mean the oaths that these people take, a psychiatrist specifically, to care for their patient as they would themselves. Depends on how you look at it. I am not by faith, but maybe by practice. Arctic. And I was baptized. Although to some would argue that it's not true. But I was baptized in the methodology of John, if that makes any sense. Because I'm much more of a multidimensionalist, and I believe in the all-being. So. Oh, whatever's going on, yeah, hang out. No reason to have issues in chat. Y'all have is there... Oh yeah, none of the main mods are here. Be careful. Could get messy. Don't do that. Hang out for the weirdness, because there's more to come for sure. As well as Andrea Yates. There's a lot with her.
Andrea was undergoing a battery of psychiatric exams. She was put on antidepressant and antipsychotic medication. As she became more stable, she started to reveal disturbing reasons for the murders.
What were you trying to accomplish then when you did take your children's lives?
Maybe in their innocent years, God would take them up.
God would take them up to be in heaven, is that what you mean? All right. And if you had not taken their lives, what did you think would happen to them?
If they would have continued stumbling.
And where would they end up?
In hell.
In hell.
Wanting to know
You're
why
good, you don't have to
Andrea was
apologize.
stumbling, the psychiatrist then asked her about her children's behavior.
What sort of things did they do which showed you they weren't right?
Well, they weren't, they just did a lot of silly stuff and didn't obey.
They did a lot of silly stuff, and they didn't obey. Those were the signs to her that they weren't going to be right. Some people can be driven by a misdiagnosis or a misuse of a psychiatric or psychotic drug. And some people can just be driven by psychotics or psychiatry. But in the case of Andrea, it was all of those. She had problems stemming from a limited environment to live in, essentially. And by the time she had her fourth child, her first psychiatrist had told her that if she had any more, she might have a psychotic break because of the fact that she kept having reoccurring postpartum depression, to the point where she was considering committing suicide. And her personality change had developed worse and worse attributes. Worse attributes like calling it pop. That's not, I'm joking. That's very Midwest. Sodas in the East, name brands. We're out here. You got a Coke? It's a weird thing. Pop. I love pop though. I love the term pop. That's actually, the pink stuff is good, but you can only get that like past St. Louis or something. Anyway, totally off topic. Andrea delved deeper and deeper into her psychosis, and alongside that psychosis ran a fervor for her religious beliefs. And those religious beliefs being centered around a couple who she knew and had interactions with, who were telling their parishioners, including her, that the only people getting into heaven were them. Isn't that convenient? So essentially, anybody who was in that group was striving to be better than everyone else in competition to get into heaven, or in the acknowledgement that they were never getting in. Hence, her delusion over her children heading the wrong way. One can really see our own ghosts if we choose. And in this case, she saw her own witches in her own home from the life that she had given. Because she didn't see them as human anymore. Lita, no, it's called Pink Pop. It's also Big Red in Texas. Same stuff, different company. I think Pink Pop is, that's not RC, that's like, is it that Faygo? It's one of them Midwest. Oh, Strawberry Pop. Oh, no, you're talking about Strawberry Pop. Okay, Pink Pop is something different. That's not Strawberry Pop. And let's not get it confused with Big Red. Okay? Get your sodas, get your colloquial sodas correct, folks. I will drink a soda on you. I don't know what that means. Hopefully it impressed something upon you about soda. I'll be drinking it. Anyhow, No, Lita, it's literally in like 6 states. Well, I'm glad that you as the thing have actually figured out how to use computers, and quite well, Arctic. That's impressive. Last I saw it, you were just groaning a lot and had bad editing. But I'm excited for you. If you don't know what I'm referencing, you missed an entire genre of movie, and I'm sorry for you. Anyways, Andrea, we're devout evangelical Christians. So their beliefs were very strong, to the point where it seems that they became deluded, or at least she did. And this came to a point where the delusion and the paranoia and the limitation of space started to become something that was, well, displayed in active performative events, destructive performative events. If your left foot toe, big toe turns green because you drink pop, I would definitely avoid that. True. No, this is true. Everything is available on Amazon. Hello. Let me find back my place in my notes. Oh, the delusion, the pain of being limited and having 4 children and going through this postpartum depression, the psychosis compounding. Andrea Yates calls her husband. The date was June 16th, 1999. He found her shaking in the motorhome, chewing her fingers. Not her fingertips, not her nails. He found her chewing her fingers to bloody stumps. The next day, she attempted suicide by overdosing on pills, which led to her being hospitalized and being prescribed antidepressants. Not long later, she begged her husband to let her die, and she held a knife up to her own neck. She was then again hospitalized. She was giving a number of medications to see what could help balance her out, including Haldol, a very powerful antipsychotic. Once she was on Haldol, her condition improved drastically, and her husband requested that she be prescribed it immediately, and that should have been this last bit and the last of the story, right? Because at that point, she seemed like she was fine again, herself, back to normal. Unfortunately, not long later, in 1999, July, Yates had another nervous breakdown, which culminated in 2 suicide attempts and then another 2 psychiatric stays. She was then diagnosed officially with postpartum depression. Her first psychiatrist, Dr. Eileen Starbranch, as I mentioned before, testified that she urged her and Rusty not to have any more children. She testified to it, because she said it would, quote unquote, guarantee future psychotic depression. Against the doctor's suggestion and urging, the couple conceived another child only 7 weeks after she was discharged from the psychiatric hospital. In March of that year, she stopped taking the Haldol and gave birth to her daughter, Mary, 9 months later. Somewhere around the death of her father in March of 2001, she stopped taking her medications altogether. And apparently the story goes that she mutilated herself while reading the Bible feverishly. She stopped feeding the youngest child, Mary. She became incapacitated and she required immediate hospitalization. In April of that year, 2001, her care changed to Dr. Mohammed Saeed, who treated her and released her. Not long later, she became, as you see her here, near catatonic. On May 3rd, 2001, she filled the bathtub. She would later confess that she had planned originally to drown the children that day, but she decided against it. She was then hospitalized. And by the way, I believe that when that happens, Arctic, that those gators may be doing humanity a favor. Because if you get caught by a gator, obviously you're done for, but if you get caught by a gator, what are you doing there, dummy? I mean, not to lighten the, but four people getting eaten by gators. I think it's a Darwin. That's a Darwinian thing. I really do. That's anyway. It's just my opinion. Yates got hospitalized again after planning to drown her children the first time. Her psychiatrist, that's what the word is, was determined that she was suicidal and assumed she had filled the bathtub to drown herself, despite her telling him otherwise. When the murders happened, the family was living in a Houston suburb of Clear Lake City. Yates continued to see Dr. Saeed and was under his care until June 20th, 2001, when Rusty left for work. Oh, I'm sorry. On June 20th, 2001, Rusty left for work, leaving her to watch the kids and against the specific instructions of Dr. Saeed's supervision. And Dr. Saeed had told Rusty he needed to supervise her around the clock because of her catatonic state. Rusty's mother, Dora Yates, had been scheduled to arrive an hour later after he left to take over watching Andrea. In the space of that hour, Andrea Yates took the lives of her 5 children. Yates started her work with her son John, then Paul, and then Luke, and then laid them in her bed. She then drowned the youngest, Mary, whom she left floating in the tub. Noah came in and asked what was wrong with Mary. He apparently ran out. Yates caught him and drowned him. She left him floating in the tub and laid Mary in John's arms in the bed. She then called police.
On June 20th, 2001, Houston police received a 911 call from a normally quiet section of town.
What's your name? Andrea Yates. What's the problem? I just need him to come. Is your husband there? No. Well, what's the problem? I need him to come. I need to know why we're coming, ma'am. Is he there standing next to you? She? Are you having a disturbance? Are you ill or what? Yes, I'm ill. You need an ambulance? No, I need a police officer. You have sent an ambulance.
She called her husband and told him to come home immediately.
Andrea, can you tell me your full and complete name?
Andrea Yates,
And how old are you?
36,
And what's your home address?
942 Beachcomber, Houston, Texas, 77062.
Okay. And you and I have been talking for a while, right?
Yes,
You understand your rights?
yes,
Okay, I'm going to read them to you again for the purposes of this recording, okay?
okay,
And you have a right to remain silent, not to make any statement at all, and that any statement you make may be used against you and probably will be used against you at your trial. Do you understand that?
yes.
I'm sorry, I'm guffawing. I just finally read your statement. One of the four was an old lady walking her dog by a pond that wasn't supposed to have gators in it. Oh my God. It's Florida. It's going to have gators. It's a pond. It's just, you should assume. And there's going to be one large one the size of a truck. The gator tried to eat her dog, but ate her instead. Well, I'm glad that Fluffy's okay. I mean, that's terrible. Terrible. Yes, yikes, yeah, she chased him first, Lizard Tree. Oh, no, Violet, there's yeah. I will later, though, because I got to see how I don't really want to see, but I kind of want to see how she got, anyway. Yeah, anyway. I don't know if I want to see it, because that's the kind of thing that's going to stick with me, isn't it? I don't know, I don't want to see that. Yeah. My imagination is too vivid for those guys. You got to be creative in my field, and I can just see things too clearly. Where's the audio? Where's the music? I need music. Hold on. Hold on. Sometimes you need a little interlude from the darkness, don't you? Sorry. The king of Sunset Strip had face cancer. Did you know that? You're talking about, oh my God, why am I blanking on dude's name? He used to sit at the end of the bar. I met him a bunch of times. Oh my God, what's his name? Bass player. I have video I shared of him. Oh my God. I hate when somebody, bass player. Drink. It'll come to me tomorrow, middle of the day. Anyways. Yes, Lizard Tree. Yeah, the solo is that zithery flute sound. All right. Neat. I didn't know that. I haven't been down on the strip or in the club world in quite a long time. That was the 90s for me. Up until about 2000, 2001. So what you're looking at is the catatonic face of, at this moment, a woman who was just murdered in cold blood. All 5 of her children, one by one, individually. Why? She says because she believed they were going down the wrong path.
Any statement you make may be used as evidence against you in court. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You have a right to have a lawyer present to advise you prior to and during any questioning. Do you understand that?
Yes.
If you are unable to employ a lawyer, you have a right to have a lawyer appointed to advise you prior to and during any questioning. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And you have a right to terminate this interview at any time. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You've been treated for depression. Is that right?
Yes.
And who's your current doctor?
Dr. Said.
And the last time you saw him?
Two days ago.
Okay. This morning, what time is it that you got out of bed this morning?
About 8:10.
Okay. And who in your household was awake at that time?
My husband, Mary, Luke, and Paul.
Okay. And what time does Rusty leave for work?
He left about 9.
And by the time Rusty left, were all your children awake at that time?
Yes.
Okay. What was going on in the household at that time? Were they eating breakfast?
Yes.
Or what?
Yes.
What were they having?
Cereal.
Is that what you had as well?
Yes.
And Rusty left, and you filled the bathtub with water, is that correct?
Yes.
And how many bathtubs are in your home?
1.
Okay. So it's just the master bath, I guess you would call it?
Yes.
Okay, is it a regular sized bathtub or is it a big one?
Regular size.
How far did you fill it?
About 3 inches from the top.
About 3 inches from the top, huh? After you drew the bath water, what was your intent?
Yes, lizard tree.
What were you about to do?
Poor babies.
Drown the children.
Is there any more to
15
be
years ago,
described?
the nation was shocked to hear about this case. Rusty Yates returned home from work to a nightmare. His 5 children had been drowned in the bathtub by their own mother, his wife, Andrea Yates.
Now, Andrea Yates was not sent to death. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. And may actually see that parole. Because now she's grieving. But then
Andrea was undergoing a battery of psychiatric exams. She was put on antidepressant and antipsychotic medication. As she became more stable, she started to reveal disturbing reasons for the murders.
What were you trying to accomplish then when you did?
once again, so you hear in her own words.
Maybe in their innocent years, God would take them up.
Sorry.
God would take them up.
Wrong video on the other side.
All right. And if you had not taken their lives, what did you think? Take your children's lives?
Maybe in their innocent years, God would take them up.
God would take them up to be in heaven? Is that what you mean? All right. And if you had not taken their lives, what did you think would happen to them?
If they would have continued stumbling.
And where would they end up? In hell.
Wanting to know what Andrea meant by stumbling, the psychiatrist then asked her about her children's behavior.
What sort of things did they do?
She wanted them to avoid hell by drowning them. Drowning is known to be one of the worst, most frightening, painful experiences because your body wants to breathe and it will fight for it. Every little bit of air, it will fight for it. And your brain doesn't shut down in trauma the way it does other traumatic events. Rather, you're aware while you struggle until you are not. The crime cannot be underestimated as to how hideous, monstrous, inhumane.
Andrea was undergoing a battery of psychiatric exams. She was put on medication. As she became more stable, she started to reveal disturbing reasons for the murders.
What were you trying to accomplish then when you did take your children's lives?
Maybe in their innocent years, God would take them up.
God would take them up to be in heaven? Is that what you mean? All right. And if you had not taken their lives, what did you think would happen to them?
If they would have continued stumbling.
And where would they end up? In hell.
Wanting to know what Andrea meant by stumbling, the psychiatrist then asked her about her children's behavior.
What sort of things did they do which showed you they weren't right?
Well, they weren't, they just did a lot of silly stuff and didn't obey.
Didn't obey you when you told them to do things. All right. You mentioned their manners before. Can you give me an example of their manners?
When Mercy's mom would visit, they would not treat her well, call her names.
Be disrespectful. Okay. Now, you concluded that they were not righteous. person and explain to me what you meant by not being righteous.
Well, they didn't do things God likes.
They did things God didn't like. This was her reasoning. Now you have to ask, why wasn't anyone paying attention? Why wasn't the doctor listening? Why wasn't anyone caring enough? Well, I would gather that just like the thought of a witch next door, she was a disenfranchised person, an other, someone who wasn't meant to fit in. Someone who was dejected because of their experiences. Someone who wasn't to be listened to by their doctor. Not because they deserved that. Not because they weren't being paid attention to by their loved ones. Frankly, their husband repeatedly, Andrea's husband repeatedly told Dr. Saeed that he wanted her back on the Haldol, despite Dr. Saeed's encouragement and repeated prescription for another psychotic, antipsychotic. The same thing he gave her in high dosage the day before she drowned her children. We cannot underestimate the witches and the terrors we create.
Andrea, can you tell me your full and complete name?
Andrea Yates,
How old are you?
36,
And what's your home address?
942 Beachcomber, Houston, Texas, 77062.
Okay. And you and I have been talking for a while, right?
Yes,
You understand your rights?
yes,
Okay, I'm going to read them to you again for the purposes of this recording, okay?
okay.
You have a right to remain silent, not to make any statement.
Did Andrea
at all, and that any statement
plan-
you make may be used against you, and
Did
probably
Andrea
will be
know
used
she would
against you
do
at your
what she
trial.
did?
Understand that?
Yes,
Or was
Statements you
Andrea
make may be used as evidence against you in court. Do you understand that?
just used as a
Yes.
pawn by her own
Right
body?
to have a lawyer present to advise you
Used
prior
as a
to
pawn
and during
of
your
accidental
questions. Do you understand?
happenstance?
yes,
If you are unable to employ a lawyer,
A collateral
you have
damage
to have a lawyer appointed
of a
to
doctor
advise
who
you
just
prior
wanted to be right.
And during any questioning, do you understand that?
yes,
And you have a right to terminate this interview.
Did 5 children have to die
yes,
for that test?
You've been treated for depression, is that right?
yes.
Was this something that we should have all known about?
Dr. Saeed,
And the last time you saw him?
two
Was this
days
something
ago.
the law should have known about before? Is this something that some doctor should have stopped?
About 18.
Well, yes, because Dr. Saeed should have looked at the prior results and given her
My
Haldol.
husband, Mary,
That's my
lived in
opinion.
Paul.
And what time does Rusty leave for work?
As in
He left
a
about
matter of
9.
fact,
And by the time Rusty left,
upon retrial,
Yes.
she was acquitted of the crime because of the psychotic state
on in the household.
and committed to an asylum
Yes,
with the possibility
Yes.
of parole.
What were they having?
And yes, Lizard Tree, I agree.
Cereal.
She knew what she was doing.
yes,
And Rusty left. You filled that up with water.
yes.
And how many bathtubs are in your home?
One.
When we look
Yeah.
into the face of darkness, do we know that it's actually evil? Or do we just see an avatar utilized by the darkness itself to achieve its goals? And would we know the difference between the two? Do we know whether we're fighting windmills or hunting winches? Are we burning innocents at the stake? Are we seeking out the devil in our own home, where none exists? I would argue that this is all a manifestation of that thing you and I both know is called the obelisk, a physical embodiment of the representation of power that can be found in every major city center of every major city in the world. Now, this symbol represents the utilization of humanity as a power source, a power that feeds off of negative, painful, chaotic energy. And it creates a mental prison perpetrated by our own imaginations. One of fear, doubt of neighbor, hate of other, devotion to the unknown. So much so that some would commit an atrocity. Not just any atrocity, but rather
Regular size.
the highest order of
From the
atrocity.
top.
It's up to us, one at a time.
Drown the children.
To reach our hand out, to see those who are caught in that prison, and be the guards for our friends and loved ones. Its responsibility is for each of us as a group on planet Earth, of a species that bleeds the same no matter what we look like or where we're from, or what we learn to eat, or how we poop, or how we breathe, or how we sleep, or who we fuck. None of that matters. All of that is a mental prison. There are no rules other than be kind, be generous, be human, do not kill, do not steal, and be thy fellow human's keeper. We are one tribe on one planet, a dark little speck in the corner of the darkest portion of the galaxy. So when you do see those you love and know, or just someone who falters and falls, I urge you, you don't have to be a leader. I'm not a leader. I'm just one of Legion. Reach your hand out. Help pull the person out of the mental prison that they make for themselves, or the maze. You can even hand them the sledgehammer of mirth. Smash down the obelisk. Let the Ben, the four-sided pyramid that holds it down, come crashing to the ground so it can be kicked to the side, and the darkness will subside. It's not something we do en masse. It's something we do like planting a seed, one at a time. To see it grow to fruition as a flower. To expect that the bees carry its pollen off into the breeze, and thereby spreading our intention and our love. At the end of the day, there's only one thing that any of us can say. If you see someone heading for that very low bar, and you know they're gonna run right into it, look up. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. For hanging out. For listening to the stories. For following the trail. I'll be back tomorrow with healthy streamer and actor tips and trips. Some new practices. Some exercise workout a little bit. Like kind of an exercise. Not really an exercise. Lifting arms and things like that. Adding to what we did last week. Anyways, hope to see you there. Be back on probably about 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. It'll be earlier because, you know, exercises and class kind of thing. And then we'll be back, I believe it's Wednesday, with more spooky stories. What am I going to drag out of the closet, down in the darkness, inside of your worst fears next? Wouldn't you like to know? Tonight, before you go to sleep, just remember, if you don't check under your bed, you don't know if something isn't there. So make sure. Look out!